I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side. I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice. My being is secure.
Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, and life is a journey, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. In life, life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. You who heal the brokenhearted, Adonai, bind up their wounds. Grant comfort and consolation to these mourners as they face their grief. Fill their lives with acts of love and kindness and truth, which serve as the genuine memorial to our dear Beth Levinston. The deep bond of love will always remain unbroken as we say, Amen.
Sa'ina el heharim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamot raglecha al yanum shomrecha. Hinei lo yanum v'lo ishan shomer Yisrael. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help will come from God, maker of heaven and earth. God will not allow your foot to slip. Your guardian will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Eternal is your keeper. God is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all evil. God will protect your being. God will guard you coming and going from this time forth and forever. Adonai yishmor tzeitcha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam.
Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini ba lemot. Lachin tzamach libi ve'agel kevodi, af besari yishkon lavetach. Ki lo tazov nafshi lishol, lo titein chasidcha lirot shachat. Todieni orach chaim, orach chaim. Seva semachot et panecha, neimot bimincha netzach. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini ba lemot.
To everything there is a season and a time for every purpose under heaven. A time for birth and a time for death. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to pull down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to preserve and a time to let go. a time to tear and a time to mend, a time for silence and a time for speech, a time for love and a time for hate, a time for war and a time for peace, a time to be born and a time to die. I'd like to share one more piece written by my Rabbi Chaim Stern. I've always found in it a touch of both reality but also of hope, and also a deep connection to the love that all of you feel for Beth, the love we feel for all of our dear ones whom we lose. Rabbi Stern wrote, "It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be and oh to lose, a thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched."
Mourning is a time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We began our service with the recitation of Psalms from Cantor Stanton and Rabbi Gluck, thus linking Beth's life with the millennial tradition of the people of Israel and the eternity of God. And now I invite members of Beth's family for some words of reflection upon her life. Ricky?
I may not be totally organized, but I'll try my best. Before starting, I would like to express the family's gratitude for the outpouring of love and sympathy and friendship in these hard times. They don't go unnoticed, and for those of you here, either virtually or in person, and those whose valiant efforts to be here were literally dampened by yesterday's weather, we thank you and love you right back. I want to take this opportunity to thank Rabbi Bazeley and Rabbi Gluck for being here and Cantor and offering their words of support. I would be remiss if I didn't thank all of the devoted people, hospice nurses, Chelsea staff, for the wonderful care they provided to Mom, but most of all, our angel Marie. I don't know what we would have done without you, day in and day out, 24/7, just like a daughter. Mom loved you so much, and from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. Never forget you. To even describe Beth as my mother-in-law sounds odd, because she was so much more than a mother-in-law. I barely ever referred to her by that term. The day we got engaged, I was told to call us Mom and Dad. Sometimes I think she treated me better than her own kids. The first time we met, I was very late. I got lost somewhere on Route 19 that must have gone over well with Mrs. There is no excuse to be late. That should have been a deal killer. I'm glad she never held it against me, or so I believe. It was never mentioned after the fact. She'll always be my second mom, especially after my mom died so long ago. She and Dad went out of their way to be the best machatunim to my mother. They had a great relationship, called each other to catch up, even if they didn't see each other so often. I was always so appreciative that she would include my mother at Levinston family events. The official report says that COVID was the cause of death, and while that may be technically true, we all know the real Beth died years ago. Painless for her, yet so painful for the rest of us. We have been mourning our loss for years. To not discuss this disease would be like not discussing the elephant in the room, the A word, even more feared than the C word, the word that was never used in Mom's presence, the word she denied even having. She went to the neurologist by herself, wouldn't let us accompany her. There was nothing wrong. She gave me the doctor's report to read. She said, here, see. I still have it. The first paragraph says, reason for visit, quote, my kids think I'm crazy. It's the word that robs you slowly and viciously of your mind, the word that is incurable or treatable or even preventable. We're told to deal with it the best you can. Easier said than done. She told us, leave me alone, I'm fine. Quote, my friends laugh when I tell them that my kids are worried about my memory, but she would start to forget beauty parlor appointments, fail to meet her friends for lunch and golf. She tried to compensate by making lists and recording everything, but inevitably, as you well know, it doesn't get better. It only gets worse. As we continued to lose our mother, as you lost your grandmother, cousin, lifelong friend, we all mourned the loss slowly and painfully. But thank God the pain was only ours. She was never sad or agitated. The disease magically made her arthritis pain disappear. She was even pain-free when her bowel ruptured 7 years ago. The doctors told me that this is not unusual with that disease. This horrible disease is not an inevitable part of aging. We must all support dementia research and support our friends and family members going through the process. We must pray for a treatment and, God willing, a cure in our lifetime. When Donna and I, and maybe others, go on an Alzheimer's walk in the near future, we will count on you for your support. But this disease left behind the sweetest lady, always smiling, and believe it or not, never complaining. For 7 years. Not the 82 before that. She kept her sense of humor. She loved watching children. She loved music. She would listen to Frank Sinatra daily and would still dance with me when she could. Mom was the most unselfish person. She led by example. She frequently accompanied friends to doctor's appointments. She was a doting parent and grandparent. She would cancel social events to accommodate being with family. She always wanted everything to be perfect for when we would visit. From getting our favorite breakfast cereal to borrowing roller skates, helmets, and other playing equipment. However, there were just some things she could not bring herself to do no matter how hard she tried. For instance, she would buy us fat-free or sugar-free frozen yogurt, served it without an explanation, and tried to pass it off as the real thing, rationalizing aloud, isn't it delicious? That's what all the women here eat. Well, good try, Mom. As I said before, I know she tried harder to please me than her own daughter. Before we came to visit, she would ask Donna, what kind of cereal does Ricky eat? What kind of milk does he drink? What flavors of yogurt do the kids like? But when she started criticizing me too, when I offered to help, wash dishes for instance, she would say, Ricky, don't bother, I'll do it, which was her way of saying, you won't do it right, and I'll have to do it again anyway. That's when I knew she loved me. She was the ultimate role model. She led by example. She had a long, strong, happy marriage. Spend time together. Be each other's best friends. Be tolerant. But if you disagree, be nice when you disagree. Stick together through thick and thin. The dance of her labor and the division of labor won't be 50-50, but don't bother keeping track. Just give 100% to your beloved. She didn't want us to worry, ever. Phone call. Hi, honey, to Donna. Just letting you know we're on the way home from the hospital emergency room. What? What are you talking about? Oh, well, they thought it might be a heart attack, but it wasn't. No big deal. A year later, hi, honey. Thought you might want to know my biopsy report came back normal. What biopsy report? But about 9-10 years ago, it was different. Forgetting everything, not paying bills. Something definitely wrong. But she would deny, would never complain about anything. Donna, tell Ricky he's worrying for nothing. my friend said, my forgetfulness is nothing. She was the ultimate role model for the family. She led by example. She made it clear that family comes first. Friends may come and go, but she was loyal to them too. Family is forever. Cherish those relationships. Respect each other's differences. Don't hold a grudge. Forgive and forget. She led by example. Hard work pays off. Don't sit on your tuchus. Help before being asked. Don't make empty promises or offers. Don't say, let me know what I should do. Just say, I'll be there to help tomorrow. What time's good for you? She and Dad worked 70-plus hours work weeks for years. It didn't pay off for a long time. Yet they were honest business people. They struggled for years. Donna told me and described the story how Mom would cry to decide which bills she could pay now and which ones would have to wait for another time. She led by example. She was proud to be Jewish and wanted us to be proud as well. She maintained the traditions, celebrate the joys at home and at synagogue. Jewish education was important. She wasn't kosher. She didn't keep Shabbat, but being Jewish was something different to her, and she took those beliefs very seriously. I don't know that she would admit this, but she made it very clear to Donna. Don't marry a Jewish doctor. Who tells their daughter that? Why? Because in her experience, and I hope nobody here's in that category, Jewish doctors, they cheat with their nurses. So don't. Anybody? My response to her, never make a blanket statement. She must have regretted her words. I did my best to make her proud. Almost there. She led by example. Live within your means. Don't use credit lines unless absolutely necessary. Pay off debt before ever going on foolish adventures. She frowned on lavishness. She said less was more, and she meant it. Many times I share the story of how she and Dad told Bruce and Donna for years, don't go into retail. They urged their kids to become professionals. So Donna and Bruce did just that. But then, when the business really took off, they sat down, and this may not be exactly accurate, but this is what I was told. They sat Donna and Bruce down for a family talk. They were already on their chosen career paths. Said, I don't know whether Mom or Dad did the talking. Hey, kids, we think you should come into the family business. And it's very lucrative. You'll be so comfortable. I can only imagine the expressions on Donna and Bruce's faces. But you said don't do that. Yes, well, that was then, but this is different. Believe me when I tell you, I think it was a good thing that Donna and Bruce did not go into business together. We'll leave that one alone. She led by example. She was so kind, right down to the very end. Don't let her sometimes hard exterior fool you. Yes, she could be bossy. She could come off as impatient with people who didn't know what they were doing. But she could also be very patient, a good listener, and a good problem solver. She led by example. Work hard, play hard. She could be silly. We don't think that retirement would suit her, but we were wrong. She had a great retirement. I'm so happy that they took a long and early retirement. And side story, I don't think this fits in, but here we go. And aside from my daughter Carly, the first and only granddaughter, my nanny had been sick for many years. My grandma, although she insisted on being called Nanny, Beth Levinston, passed away early yesterday morning. In the end, she went quickly and peacefully. When she was still more herself, we always had this game of who could tell the other, I love you more, last before letting the other win. Every time we spoke on the phone or got together or parted ways, like all Levinstons, she was extremely stubborn and usually won, even going so far as to send me a 2 or 3 foot plaque that just said, love you more. I guess it's finally my turn to win. I love you more and wish that you could still fight me for that honor. Could I give some of these away? I'm not done, not done, not done. D. As I stated earlier, near the end, I'll be okay. As I stated earlier, she was well known for having a lot, and I mean a lot, of suggestions, quote, quote. But when it came to taking care of her grandchildren, we lucked out because Mom would always back off and say, what was Ricky's thought about that? If Ricky thinks it's okay, then it's okay. She wasn't going to argue with the pediatrician. But on the flip side, she would criticize Donna, suggest. She would say, Donna, you're a know-it-all. Just because you're a doctor's wife doesn't mean you're a doctor. She led by example. Plan ahead, don't procrastinate, make lists, write it down or you'll forget. Well, I don't know about the Levinstons, but the Braffs are still working on that. Can you see the irony? Her ADD daughter married her ADD son-in-law, and they had 2 ADD grandkids. Sorry, Mom. They say it's inherited, but it must be from Dad's side. Finishing up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Somebody, thank you. Almost done, I promise. Woo! My kids and I have vowed to remember her the way she was before. Fun-loving, wise, caring, a family matriarch who always put others before herself, and a role model to guide us through the rest of our days. We will always miss you. And, finally, Mom, the lessons you have given us over our lifetime will be your legacy. Thanks for everything, and we promise to pay it forward. We will always love and cherish you.
Ricky and I did not read each other's, and so there might be some overlap. For many years, I've told my family to never ask me to give a eulogy at a funeral of any loved one. I was sure that I would never be able to stand up here and do this. So bear with me, because once I sat down last night to write this, the thoughts just kept coming. It's way too long, but it would take me another week to make it shorter. Those who know me well won't be surprised by that. Someone I know sent me a condolence email yesterday, and she said, quote, I hope you're able to time travel and wrap yourself in memories from better days, quote, end quote. My goal is to try to do that today. As I was writing, I was trying to remember the Beth we once knew. But there are so many different Beths. There was the young Beth and the popular teen Beth. She was born in February 1933 to Francis and Joel Dreyer in New Brunswick, New Jersey, only minutes away from where we are now. Her mother was beyond wonderful, but unfortunately she died in 1968 at 61 years young. My mom was devastated. Her father was a strict and stern disciplinarian. She went to Camp Scatico in Dutchess County, New York. She loved sleepaway camp, and in later years, she sent all 4 of her grandchildren to a different camp so that they could have some of the similar or same experiences. She yelled and cheered a lot at camp and at sporting events later in life, to the point where she often lost her voice, a trait that has been passed down 2 generations. She had one older brother, Stanley Dreyer, who she adored, and she proudly bragged that any of her male suitors needed Stanley's approval to be able to date Beth. He always protected her. She was very popular in her youth. She dated a lot. She was always considered the belle of the ball. She even dated Frank Lautenberg, who ultimately became senator from New Jersey when he was a young man. She went to Mary Washington College in Virginia for a couple of years. She always told us it was a sister college to the University of Virginia. She left there without finishing and went to Toby Coburn in New York City, and she traveled there by train from New Brunswick every day. Toby Coburn website says that the Toby Coburn School prepared individuals with high school or college educations for careers in the fashion field. She worked as an assistant buyer for Bamberger's in Plainfield before eventually leaving to join Dad in his family's retail business. Then there was the wife, Beth. She married Charles on June 14th, 1956. This isn't in here, but Ricky and I got married on June 15th, and Bruce and Rox on June 16th, many years later, and we always had the pleasure of celebrating our anniversaries together while Dad was alive. She and Charles had a long and loving marriage of 47 years until his death in 2003. Dad is gone 19 years next month. They always worked hard, but they also played hard. They enjoyed working together, boating, fishing, college basketball, college football, golfing, casino gambling, and following the stock market, and so many other things. She threw parties for my dad's 30th, 40th, 50th, 60th, and 70th birthdays, and somehow she managed to pull off the surprise each and every time. She always put the needs of her husband, and also her kids and grandkids, above her own needs. Then there's the professional Beth. She joined Dad in his family business. They owned numerous retail stores. But she came home for dinner, and then after dinner she worked well into the night, paying family bills and organizing business things. Together, they ran numerous retail stores, selling mostly costume jewelry with a lower price point, but also handbags and lots of other things. She gave a lot of local teens their first job, as well as several here today who can say that working for our parents, was their first job. She was a great jewelry buyer. She said if she liked it too much, she knew it wouldn't sell in their stores. She was also the human resources department, the merchandiser, and single-handedly trained every salesperson in all of their stores. She pretty much did everything except the schlepping of packages from one store to another in a station wagon. That was Dad's job. The business they grew together became a New Jersey institution with as many as 12 or 15 stores at a peak. She worked 7 days a week. Mom was most definitely a workaholic. She was a superwoman before it was popular. She often worked 80 hours a week during busy seasons. Mom was definitely an efficiency expert. Ricky referred to this too. This spilled over from business into her personal life. She told waitresses how to do their jobs. She would be upset if they took her order, then stopped at another table to take their order before stopping in the kitchen to drop off our order. She felt that was inefficient. She had an opinion about how everyone should conduct their business. She was almost always right, although we may never have appreciated it. She retired at age 57 in 1990, and then they moved to Concordia in Middlesex County and spent the winters in Florida. Then there was the mother, Beth. She was the cool mom in the neighborhood, the envy of all the other kids in our neighborhood in Edison. Everyone confided in Mom, and most of the neighborhood kids told her things they wouldn't even tell their own moms. She would tell guys who came to pick me up when I was a new driver, or even when I wasn't driving yet, to be careful, you have precious cargo. That was always how she told them. On more than one occasion, she made a guy who came to pick me up take her for a ride around the block first to make sure that his driving skills were okay. This isn't a joke. She didn't stop helping us when we grew up and left the home. Every house, every apartment that we ever moved into, she'd come to our houses and set up the kitchen and unpack, do whatever she could do to make our life easier. She would also do, for many years in the future, anything could make our lives easier, including helping financially. One of her favorite phrases when we would be going out on vacation or on the town or on a date or anything, she would say, "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." With Mom, there was a right and a wrong way to do everything. Sometimes it would get frustrating, like when she insisted that there was a right and a wrong way to pull up pantyhose. And hundreds of other things. She always did try to change us, making us better versions of ourselves and improving on us. Even so, she would give you the shirt off of her back. She had opinions on what we should buy, wear, and do, and she never hesitated to tell us. Turns out, she was very often right. Don't buy that kitchen table with a crack in the middle. You'll never be able to clean out the crumbs. She also told us not to buy everyday flatware that we selected on our bridal registry because it was perfectly smooth, and she felt we should have flatware that has texture or hammered. Otherwise, she said it would show all the watermarks from the dishwasher and it would never look clean. Of course, she was right. That was the scary part. She said her ideas were suggestions, never criticisms. She was truly a perfectionist. Even though when we were older, we didn't appreciate hearing her opinions on everything and anything. Bruce didn't get as many suggestions as I did. Somehow, she and Bruce had an amazing relationship, and he didn't get as many criticisms. He could always make her laugh right up until the last 6 months or so. She asked Ricky and Rox to call her Mom the moment we were each engaged. She and Roxanne were incredibly close. Roxanne always called her Mommy. How many people do you know who are close enough with their mother-in-law to call them Mommy? Then there was the friend Beth. She had a wide circle of friends, and once you became her friend, you were her friend forever. Family members of all of the closest ones are here today or watching the live stream. They had endless good times with the Tamroffs, the Steinbergs, the Taybacks, all of whom called her Aunt Beth. She had infinite good times with the Pazamants, the Arkeys, and the Feinbergs. Later, when they retired and moved to Florida, she became incredibly close with Marcy and Hal Sanders. Her sister-in-laws, Rose Dreyer and Donna Levinston, were really bonus friends too. She genuinely cared about and loved everyone who's here and who's watching the live stream today. Somehow, people were drawn to her. Everyone loved her, starting with every staff member at her golf community to every service provider and just about everyone she met. The other sides of her she only reserved for the four of us and maybe her four grandchildren by extension. Then there was the role of nanny. That was by far her most favorite role for sure. She sent all four of her grandchildren to Camp Moden in Maine, the oldest Jewish camp in New England. She helped us financially, including with the four grandchildren's educational costs at times, and too many other things to name here. Nothing made her happier than her grandchildren. When we would come to Frenchman's Creek to visit, she would pay for our flights, then she would spend a full week preparing for our visits. Borrowing, Ricky said this too, but borrowing or renting high chairs, cribs, toys, bicycles, and more, even though we needed different items or different sizes every time we came. She also went food shopping and secured every food item we requested, then returning everything after we left. She made reservations at every restaurant, took us to wherever we wanted to go, always the trendiest restaurants. And then she would put up with us changing them or changing the time or if we changed our mind. And she would babysit the kids so we would have some time alone when we were in Florida. The most amazing thing is that she would always cancel all of her social plans for a week while we were in town and often cancel plans for the following week so she could recuperate from our visits. She would book our flights, pick us up at the airport, rent a van when needed. She kept an assortment of brochures of every child-related tourism attraction in Florida. Her collection would rival that of any travel agency, and she took us to as many as possible. Whether in New Jersey or in Florida, she was available to babysit anytime on no notice, and she would cancel any and all other plans to spend time with her grandchildren. She had a unique relationship with each of her grandchildren. Carly, the first grandchild and only girl, they had a very special relationship. Jack was truly great with her. In later years, he was somehow able to get her to eat when no one else could. He would tell her that he made whatever it was he was trying to feed her, and then she would actually eat it. My kids picked up on that, and when she was at our house and Jack was nowhere around, they would say, "Nanny, you should eat this. Jack made it." Danny is currently, as most of you probably know, is a stand-up comic now. But before that, he was a very good teenage magician. He performed magic for a crowd at her assisted living, and he actually donated his time to do that. He really didn't like the experience of performing magic for a group of senior citizens who didn't even get it, but Nanny was so very proud of him. Danny also came to see her frequently. He was there as recently as 2 weeks ago. Max, yesterday we asked Max about Nanny, and he said, quote, "Nanny embodied class, from her Lexus to her jewelry, and always having apricots in a crystal bowl." She would be unbelievably proud of Max now if she knew how well he was doing as a rising star in commercial real estate in central and northern New Jersey. She wasn't shy about her love for her grandchildren. She freely told anyone who would listen that the best part of having children was having grandchildren. Then there's the retired Beth. She spent the winters in Florida, but her definition of winter kept getting longer and longer as the years went on. It started as January and February, and eventually the time period in Florida ran from October to May, the end of May. She didn't even come home for Mother's Day or Passover like most other people did. She lived in Frenchman's Creek in Florida, and her Frenchman's Creek years were wonderful ones. She really took to the lifestyle that she enjoyed at Frenchman's Creek. It was a charmed life in a very special community. She made a ton of new friends. It was very fancy, but Mom and Dad were modest about it, and I think a little embarrassed. So instead of saying they bought a house in Palm Beach Gardens, they generally told people that they lived in Jupiter, because Jupiter was less well known and the words Palm Beach weren't in the name. They were just not people to show off. I think they felt that they were, for a while, that they were out of their element, but they quickly fit in and enjoyed all the luxuries that came with living in Frenchman's Creek. Those Frenchman's Creek years taught us a lot of the finer things in life, including great restaurants and treating us to massages at the spa every time we visited. Then there was a widow, Beth. Following Charles's death, she met Saul Silverman in 2009, and they were together for about 5 years until she moved to Chelsea Assisted Living in November of 2014. She enjoyed Saul's companionship, and I believe that Mom lived several years longer than she might have because of her companionship with Saul. He kept in touch long after she lost her cognitive abilities and visited her for a few years even after she moved to Chelsea. And he called her daily in those beginning years, even well beyond the time she could use a phone or understand who he was. He died earlier this year. Then there was the cognitively impaired Beth. Ricky spoke of her. The mom we knew is long gone. In 2005, she was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. That was by the doctor who Ricky referred to. And over the last 17 years, it's progressed slowly to very advanced dementia. She had what some referred to as pleasant dementia. She had mellowed from her previous self, and she was actually delightful to be around. Even until this week, I don't think she ever complained about anything or criticized anyone in the past 7 or 8 years. After a year or more at an adult daycare center in Monroe Township, and that was 7.5 years ago in November of 2014, we moved her into an assisted living facility called the Chelsea at Bridgewater. It was just minutes from Bruce's house, office, very close to Bruce's house and very close to my office. At that point, she was still walking and talking, but the old Beth was gone. The day after we moved her into the new facility, she never once asked about her home in Concordia or her home in Frenchman's Creek or Saul or whatever happened to any of them. She was pretty impaired even at that time. Yet she still enjoyed life as long as you stayed in the moment. She still had humor until just a year or two ago, maybe more recent. She laughed often, even though she hadn't said a word in years. Ricky couldn't believe that medically that she still had a sense of humor well beyond the time she was unable to speak. At the assisted living, people always came up to me to tell me that my mother was a lovely person and how fond they were of her. I could never understand why they would say that, even though because in my mind, they never knew my mom. But if only they knew her when. But I guess they saw something in her that they knew represented a wonderful person. Maybe it was just the fact that she waved to them or smiled at them. This didn't just happen a few times. It happened every time I was there. As Mom got worse, her 4 children split up the tasks, almost like a corporation. Oops. Bruce took the responsibility for what I called buildings and grounds and medication management. He filled the pill boxes every other week for the last 7.5 years, and he kept her laughing. He also took her on his boat every year, no matter what it took to make sure she enjoyed it. The last trip we did on his boat with Mom, he even borrowed a pontoon boat just so Mom would be able to climb on and off it and enjoy the day out with the Levinston family on Lake Hopatcong. Rox was in charge of the food and nutrition. She made home-cooked meals for Mom every week for years. Even though Mom was entitled to the full meal plan at Chelsea, Rox just didn't think their food was good enough for Mom. She was also the personal shopper and the only one who ever bought Mom clothes. She was an amazing daughter-in-law. She picked up things that the aides needed. She supplied the inshore, and she visited her independently all the time without Bruce. Ricky was also an amazing son-in-law. He was very involved in her medical care over the years, often in the background, feeding Bruce and I questions to ask the doctors or staff. I was in charge of everything financial, including bill paying, legal, and the keeper of all the records, and in charge of appealing the hospice determinations every time they tried to kick off Mom from hospice. I'm proud to say that I won 4 hospice appeals over the last 7 months. Bruce and I shared human resources responsibilities. Probably the best thing Bruce and I did right was interviewing and selecting the perfect caregivers. Boy, did we get it right when it came to hiring Marie. Marie has been with Mom for 4 years. In the past 2.5 during the pandemic, she stayed with Mom day and night, never took a vacation day, and I'm not exaggerating, in 2 years, with the exception of 1 week to attend her sister's wedding out of state, and 2 or 3 isolated days when she had an important appointment. Marie really loved Mom, and it showed in the way she spoke with Mom, touched Mom, fed Mom, bathed Mom, and did everything for Mom. She was a caregiver extraordinaire, and we thank you, Marie, from the bottom of our hearts. Dementia cruelly stole her mind. But as you heard before, she never complained. Even though dementia robs a person of their brain and her memory, amazingly, some semblance of her personality could be seen through till the end. She smiled at people at other tables. She waved to the other residents until she could no longer do that. She kept her basic personality. She was everyone's favorite patient at the adult daycare, as well as later at the assisted living. Some of this I said already. Amazingly, until the very recently, Mom still laughed at jokes at the appropriate place and after the punchline. She loved dancing until she stopped walking just a couple of years ago. She loved music, Frank Sinatra particularly, until almost the very end. She stopped talking in the last few years. Even though we thought she had forgotten how to eat, she surprised us by devouring chocolate, pudding, or dessert, anything chocolate. The summer, about her keeping some of her personality, the summer before the pandemic, when we went on Bruce's boat, Lake Hopatcong, she was barely talking a few words a day and at that point, and he was driving the boat too fast. She got upset. We didn't think she could say a whole sentence at that point, and she loudly and clearly said to Bruce, "I'm going to kill you." Remember that? She would, even at the assisted living, she was always the first person to get up and dance, and also at the rehab. She loved Malamars and almost any kind of chocolate. She loved Anshe Emeth, and she worshipped Rabbi Miller. This is really the conclusion. Losing one's mom is one of life's saddest milestones. Losing a mom to dementia is particularly hard because it's been said that you lose them twice. Others have referred to it as the long goodbye. It's both of those things. She died on Sunday in the middle of the night at 89 years old. She was on hospice for 13 months, but last Wednesday, she was diagnosed with COVID, and she succumbed to COVID in only 4 days. Less than 18 hours before she passed, she needed to be transferred from the assisted living that she had been living at for so long to an inpatient hospice nursing care because there were staff shortages and they couldn't get round-the-clock hospice nurses to come to the Chelsea. We know she's at peace and surrounded by the same unconditional love she has always shown Bruce and I, Ricky and Rox, Carly, Danny, Max, and Jack. I was there on Friday night when she was transferred to the inpatient hospice, and again on Saturday night. I left a few hours before she passed. The last words I told her were that Bruce and I had planned everything, that we had gotten along very well in that process. We had made all the decisions that needed to be made without fighting or even disagreeing. She could go, and we would be okay. I think she needed to hear that. She died only a few hours later. Bruce also called Mom that night. He couldn't go. He would have obviously been there, but he couldn't go. It was Jack's graduation. But he called Mom that night so he could say his goodbye before he left to attend Jack's graduation. Mom, we know that you're finally at peace. We will cherish all the memories of the wonderful times, and we will miss you and love you forever. We will try to pass along all your wonderful traits to our children and grandchildren. Your memories will be part of our lives forever.
Yes, it was too long. Way too long.
What beautiful recollections and testimonials from loving children. I'm not sure what else I could possibly add right now. I think you hit all the check marks there. No. But I think your mother would have loved it. And I thought that she, if she could, would be so proud of the two of you and how you spoke this morning. Yesterday when we were talking on Zoom and we were recalling her life, there was a poem that kept going through my head. The poem goes as follows. Weep for me when I am gone, for no longer will I dance in my garden, plucking perfumed roses for my table, filling my ears with songs of hummingbirds, trimming my parsley and chives for my salad. Weep for me. Weep for me when I am gone, for no longer will I sink into my garden, weeding and grunting beneath my fruit trees, drunk on the fragrance of rotting plums, until I fall asleep embraced by the sun. Weep for me. Weep for me, but then go dance with your lover in my garden. Pluck its bouquets, breathe its aromas, sing its songs, taste its sweet nectar. Gently settle into a great serenity. Compose your weeping for me into rejoicing and laughter. I don't know if your mom knew that poem, but she very well might have, because she knew the poet. She knew the poet, in fact, you did too, because for a period of time he was your rabbi. That poet was Rabbi Harvey Fields. I'm not sure exactly when he wrote that poem, and I don't know if Beth heard it and was inspired by it, but regardless, to me, it seemed to contain the spirit of how she lived her life and the desires she would have wanted to communicate to you if only she could. Yes, weep for your mom, because whenever death happens, it's tragic and sad. But remember when the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, came into her room to greet your mother, he came not as an intruder or an invader, but as a friend, releasing her from a decline of Alzheimer's and dementia. So yes, I believe your mom would say, weep for me, but also go and live. Celebrate my life and then keep on living yours and do it fully. Work hard, play hard, because that's how I lived my life. She worked hard in her garden of life. She worked hard at the store to make a living to pull it together. And let's be honest, without her, that store would not have existed very long. And without you all stringing price tags on the jewelry at night. But she worked hard and she played hard, whether it was traveling or boating or whatever it might be. To her children, Donna and Bruce, and her children-in-law, Ricky and Roxanne, she was mom. There was no such thing as in-laws. She would call you constantly and speak with you, help guide you and embrace you just as she would her own flesh and blood. And for her children, she was a mother that you looked up to, no matter how much she might have given suggestions and advice as to how to do things. She taught you incredible life lessons like the value of strong work ethic, how to be driven and determined, how to think outside the box and run a business, and how and why you should care for others. Yesterday, Rabbi Miller shared with me just how much she loved the temple and loved her faith and loved her Judaism, and how she was a part of this temple community, and how she would have loved to have seen all of you here because she collected friends. Friends were family, and she never ever forgot a birthday for anyone. So to be buried amongst family and congregants here, it's like coming back home. And as much as she loved her children and friends, there was no comparison when it came to her grandchildren. Your nanny was tremendous. And she loved you all fiercely. And what a legacy she leaves to you. One of the most important things Beth did was teach her children how to raise decent and good human beings. And the value of what it means to care for others has been transmitted down to the grandchildren. You all know the power of her unconditional love and what it means to have that love for others. You all know what it means to have someone in your life you can go to for honest answers and bounce ideas back and forth. And you know what it means to have someone in your life who inspires you to live life as fully as she did. Now the charge to you is to be that driving force that Beth was for others. Yes, even though we kind of said goodbye to Beth many years ago, this afternoon we still weep for her. But in the words of one of her rabbis, weep for me and then go dancing in my garden. Pluck its bouquets, breathe its aromas, sing its songs, taste its sweet nectar, and gently settle into a great serenity. Compose your weeping, and now go forth rejoicing. We take a moment now for silent prayer and reflection as we think about the light that was the life of Beth Levinston. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and our Redeemer. We rise now for El Malei Rachamim.
El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina Im Keroshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazirim Et Nishmat Batya Bat Yoel Frances Shehalecha Leolama Baal Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Kenafav Leolamim Veitzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu נחלתה ותנוח בשלום על משכבה ונאמר Amen.
God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold her close to you forever, so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace, as together we say, Amen. On the trifold brochure that you were given earlier, before we say Mourner's Kaddish, there is a poem that Beth's grandmother wrote about 100 years ago or so. If you have the card in front of you, I want to invite you to read it out loud with me, because I think it's a good way of introducing the Kaddish to us as a community. The Sabbath Prayer. Together, O Lord and Father, we fervently thank Thee for all Thy kindness to me and to mine during the past week. Every day show me new mercies of Thy wonderful providence, as often as I have thought that I am not worthy of so much goodness. As I look back upon the week and search my heart and prove my way, I must confess that I did not live as right as I ought, nor have I done all the good which I may have achieved. Yet Thou knowest how earnestly I desire to reach up higher in the perfect way, and how I regret my shortcomings and failings. Assist me, O God, in every recurring Sabbath, I may have less and less cause for self-reproach, and the teachings of Thy words may find the fruitful soul of my heart. I pray for the life and well-being of my dear ones, and for all who worship me at this hour, but especially for the suffering and afflicted in our midst, that Thou mayst send comfort and relief. If trial should come to me or mine, may they find our hearts so prepared with faith and trust that we shall never doubt Thy goodness, but accept the corrections with patience and humility, and praise be all the days of our lives. Amen. So, this poem, I think, beautifully reflects not just the family history of saying this every week, but also if we were to look at, instead of looking back on this past week, but looking back upon a past life, I think we will reflect and see that she achieved what she prayed for with the family every single week. And what reassurance that is for the family to know that she has achieved the greatness and the goodness that she was searching for. And now may the love and eternal connection of our souls give us strength as we turn to recite the words hallowed by time. Sanctifying the name of God, we honor the memory of Beth Levinston with the words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, bi'almad yivrach rotei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chaye chon of yom echon of chaye dekol Beit Yisrael, ba'galal v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam olomei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha b'richu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, da'amiran bi'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and to all Israel, to which we say, Amen. Al Mekoma Tavo Vashalom. May Beth come to her eternal home in peace. Adonai roi lo exar. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. You lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
Like arms. You want to make a second line right this way, you can. Please watch your step, gentlemen. Somebody want to come this way, please.